I call this the freak factor because I believe that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and that what makes us weak also makes us strong. I know a little bit about being weird. One of the first things that people ask me when they see me is, how tall are you? I'm 6'6", but I'm 6'9" in heels. And one of the problems with growing up tall and growing up poor is you grow up faster than your family's ability to get you pants. When I was a kid, I always had high water pants or floods. They never made it all the way down to the floor. But my mom didn't want me to feel bad, so she told me they were capri pants and they were coming back in style. I'm 6'6", but my wife is just 5'3". If you wonder how that works, just realize that in our relationship, deodorant is much more important than breath mints. But I've always been weird and I've always been different, and the problem is most people don't believe that what makes us weird is what makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak is what makes us strong. They believe something different. They believe that what makes us weird is what makes us awful, and that's why we get teased and we get bullied and we get pressured from teachers and from parents to be normal and to fit in. And they believe that what makes us weak is what makes us wrong, and that what we need to do is fix what's wrong with us to be a better, successful person. Robert Quinn says in his book, Deep Change, that deviance will always generate external pressures to conform. When you perform beyond the norms, the systems will adjust and try to make you normal. And what I want to talk to you about today is doing the exact opposite of that. The problem is, we all have something that psychologists call negativity bias. Negativity bias means that when we see something right and we see something wrong, we always focus on what's wrong, even when what's wrong is very, very small and what's right is very, very big. Imagine that I had a big stain on my shirt, a big baseball-sized stain on my shirt. Every one of you in this room would be staring at that stain. You'd be questioning my professionalism and ability as a human being because I had a big stain on my shirt. Sooner or later, even though it was obvious, you'd have to whisper to the person next to you, check out the stain. Do you see it? And don't look now, he's looking over. But in a second, do you see it? It's huge, big stain. What is that? Is that gravy? Who has gravy for breakfast? There's not a single person in this room, no matter how positive and how encouraging you think you are, who's sitting there looking at that stain on my shirt thinking to themselves, that Dave Rendall is doing a good job. Because 98% of that shirt is stain-free. Nice job, Dave. Nice job. But when you go to school, 98% is an A+. That gets you a 4.0 grade point average. But if you were asked to rate my appearance at the end of the session, some of you might even not only give me an F, but give me a 0 because I had a stain on my shirt. We see what's wrong instead of what's right, even when what's wrong is really, really small and what's right is really, really big. Kids even do this. They don't seem to be needed trained to do this. Kids do this naturally. I was watching TV real early one morning, watching Dora the Explorer. How many of you ever had to watch Dora the Explorer with somebody? How many of you, all of the Spanish you know is from Dora the Explorer, right? Yeah, there you go. You can ask for candy and your grandma, but that's all you've got, really, when it comes down to it. So I'm watching Dora the Explorer with my 2-year-old, and she's talking to me, but I'm into it, and I want to know if we're going to get the riddle correct and get across the troll bridge. And she's talking to me, and I'm asking her to be quiet so I can focus. And finally, I pause it because I don't want her to miss the important parts. And I look at her, and she's saying, Daddy, is your tummy full? And I said, honey, you wake up so damn early in the morning. Daddy's tummy isn't full. We haven't even had breakfast yet. And she says, no, Daddy, is your tummy full? And then I look at her, and I really focus, and she's not looking at me. She's looking at this. She pokes it a couple times, and she looks at me real straight in the eye, and she goes, you got a baby in there. I've got skinny arms, I've got skinny legs, I've got a neck so small I have to buy my clothes off the internet, but I'm fat in one spot, and my daughter found that spot and asked me if I was expecting. Friends of mine sent their son to school because it's not just kids that do it, adults do it too. And sometimes the people we would hope would point out what's right are pointing out what's wrong. Their son's name was James, and they sent him to school, to kindergarten, and they thought he was going to be successful because they were successful, and educated because they were educated, and that he'd grow up to be professional because they were professional. And the teacher called a couple weeks into school and said, I think something's wrong with your son. I think he has some kind of mental disability, and I think he has oppositional defiant disorder. And I think you need to send him to psychiatrists to find out just how disabled he probably is. So they sent him to a psychiatrist, and they waited anxiously for 2 weeks to get the results, and the psychiatrist called back and he said, I have good news for you. Your son doesn't have any sort of mental disability, and your son doesn't have oppositional defiant disorder. And in fact, what your son does have is a genius-level IQ. Seneca said there's no great genius without a touch of madness. And the problem is, because of negativity bias, when we're presented with genius and madness, we tend to see the madness and miss the genius. When I was a kid, I got in trouble for 3 things at school. I wasn't able to sit still, be quiet, or do what I was told. Because of that, teachers and my parents told me that I was rebellious, that I was inappropriate, that I was immature and I was childish. I had no self-control and no self-discipline, and that if I didn't fix these things, I was going to end up homeless and living in a van down by the river. Sooner or later, they'd give up on me and they'd send me to the principal's office. And I remember one time I was in 3rd grade, I was 8 years old, and they sent me to the principal's office because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. And he sat me down on his lap, which seems questionable now looking back on it. And he told me a story about 3 kinds of bad people. He said there's bad people, really bad people, and people who are too far gone. He was trying to help me. I want to make this very clear. His intentions were good. He thought he was helping me by taking the difference out of me and trying to make me more normal. He said you're on the wrong path, and at the end of the wrong path is a cliff, and when you fall off the cliff, you get hurt so badly you don't have the chance later in life to get on the right path. You need to learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what you're told. Sir Ken Robinson says many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not because the thing that they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. Because see, I got in trouble my whole life because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told all around the world and get paid to do 3 things. I get paid to stand up, not sit down. I get paid to talk, not to be quiet. And I get paid to run my own business, not do what somebody else tells me to do. The weirdness that everybody was trying to normalize, the weakness that everybody was trying to fix was a big strength, but nobody saw it because all they could see was what was wrong and they couldn't see what was right. And because they couldn't see it, I couldn't see it. George Eliot says we begin to believe what the world believes about us. And when people tell you you're wrong and you're weird for long enough, you start to believe it, and you stop trying to succeed because people tell you that it's not possible. And what I want you to see is that it's not just true for me, it's true for all of us, that every one of our weaknesses comes with a corresponding strength. I'm tall, and that's good. People give you IQ points that you don't deserve for being tall. Scientists have proved that over and over again. I think you do deserve them for being tall. Other people disagree. Science. Okay, but things like facts and stuff like that. But they also, tall people make more money. I think we deserve it. But tall people make more money than shorter people do for the same work. And that seems unfair to everybody except mostly me. But it's not great to be tall all the time. The biggest problem with being tall is on the airplane. When I go to get on the airplane, the flight attendant sees me and says, "Watch your head," which is hard to do if you've ever tried. And I get into the airplane. And my backpack is dragging across the ceiling, and I get to my seat, and I've got an exit row seat or something because I fly a lot. But sooner or later, I have to go to the bathroom. And in order to get into the bathroom, I have to duck down again, and I close the door behind me because I can't turn around, and I need to go to the bathroom, but the toilet is over there, and I am over here, and the ceiling goes like this. So as I try to get closer, it just pushes my face closer and closer and closer to the toilet. And so I'm smart, and I realize that's not an effective strategy, so I go with more of a limbo yoga kind of approach, and I try to get in there. But then I realize the right parts are not getting closer. And that's when I discover, wait a second, there is a sink right there. That's a whole lot higher and a whole lot closer. Seems sort of custom made for what we're doing here. It's good to be tall, except when it's not, okay? It's a strength to be tall, and it's also a weakness. It's an advantage, and it's also a disadvantage. And I don't get to keep the advantages of height without also embracing the disadvantages of height. Every weakness has a corresponding strength. Peter Drucker said it this way. He said, strong people always have strong weaknesses too. If you want strong children, if you want strong students, if you want strong employees, if you want a strong spouse, if you want strong friends, you have to remember that strong people always have strong weaknesses too. Where there are peaks, there are valleys. But we don't like valleys, so we're busy trying to tear down the peaks to fill in the valleys. The best way to understand this is to think about side effects. Every medicine has side effects. One of my favorite side effects is for Requip. It's a medicine for restless leg syndrome. One of the symptoms, or one of the side effects, is compulsive gambling urges. That's awesome, right? That's awesome. But every medicine has side effects, right? Every medicine has side effects. And if you try to reduce the side effects of a medicine, the only way to do it is to reduce the benefits of the medicine as well. And when we try to reduce the side effects of the people in our lives, when we try to eliminate the weaknesses of the people in our lives, what we end up doing is we end up destroying the strength that corresponds with that weakness. George Eliot said that every limit is a beginning as well as an ending. And I want to talk to you about the beginnings that come with the limits that we have. They were doing a study of millionaires in the United Kingdom and discovered that 50% of the millionaires in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. 33% of the entrepreneurs in another study had dyslexia in the United States, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. Richard Branson is a billionaire, the founder of the Virgin series of companies. He has dyslexia. And you might be thinking, maybe he's not as excited about dyslexia as you are, Dave. But they asked him that exact question. How has your dyslexia affected your success? And he said, strangely, I think my dyslexia has helped. Paul Orfalea was so dyslexic, he got kicked out of 4 different high schools and then was fired by 4 family businesses run by his parents and brothers and sisters. So left with no other choice, he became an entrepreneur. He started a little company you may have heard of called Kinko's and recently sold it to FedEx for $2.4 billion. And he said this, he said, I think everyone should have dyslexia. What he's saying is, if you take away my dyslexia, you're taking away a part of me. And what scientists have started to discover, kind of by accident, is instead of saying, what else is wrong with people with dyslexia, they've started asking, what might be good about having dyslexia? And even though there are weaknesses with dyslexia, there are strengths that seem to cause the people who fail in school to be more successful in life than normal people are. There's a strength, a powerful and amazing strength that goes with the obvious weakness. I ran a 40-mile ultra-marathon once. I haven't run recently because it's not good for the baby. But when I finished, my brother-in-law said, Dave, you were crazy and awesome. And I think in order to be awesome, we have to be willing to be a little bit crazy. But we need to dig into that a little bit more because my brother-in-law was praising me for being very, very, very active. Which is interesting because for my whole life, I'd always been very, very, very active. But when you're a child and you're very, very, very active, what do they call it? They call it ADHD, and they give you medicine that fixes it and makes you better, and you get punished and you get criticized for being very, very, very active as a child. But as an adult, I was being praised and rewarded for the same thing that I used to be punished and criticized for, because I'd turned up the volume on the thing that people had spent their whole life telling me to turn down the volume on. I'm amplifying the very thing that people told me to moderate. I think too often people have telling us that we've gone too far, when I would argue we haven't gone far enough yet. We need to go pro. What makes us weird also makes us wonderful. What makes us weak also makes us strong. But we need to find the right fit for our unique strengths and weaknesses. When I was a kid, I fell down off my bike and I broke my arm very, very badly. Broke both bones completely through, and they came up at a 90-degree angle to the rest of my arm. They put me back together the best they could, but they put me back together a little bit wrong. I was 12 years old, and when I was 20, I thought it was fine. I thought it was normal, and I was trying to play the guitar, and I realized I couldn't. I realized I couldn't turn my left arm over like you're supposed to. And that's when I realized why I'd struggled in the drive-thru for so many years. Because I could give them the money just fine, and then they'd go to give me the change, and I'm like, oh. They're like, turn it over, and I'm like, okay. And they think I'm messing with them because I'm so tall they can't even see my face. My sister-in-law says I should get a basket on a stick and just reach it in there and go, no, fill it, yeah. But then I went to Australia. And in Australia, they drive on the left-hand side of the road, so they drive on the right-hand side of the car. And the first place I drove was to McDonald's. Because I wanted to know what it was like to reach my right arm out the window and bring the change safely back into the vehicle like everybody else does. And that's an important point, because what that illustrates is the power of situations. See, my left arm is still broken. My left arm is still disabled. My left arm is still damaged. But when I put myself in a different situation, the weakness disappears and all people can see is the strength. And that's what we need to do. We're too busy trying to fix people, and we're not doing a good enough job of helping people find the match between who they are and what they need to do. Thorkild Sohn runs an organization in Denmark called Specialister, and they do software testing, and they hire people with autism on purpose because two of the symptoms of autism, the reason you get diagnosed with autism, are hyper-focus and the desire to do things over and over again. You know what Thorkild Sohn needs at his software testing company? He needs people with hyper-focus who do the same thing over and over again. He seeks out people with a supposed disability because at his organization it's a competitive advantage. He's recently started a partnership with SAP, the software giant, to do the same thing, and they've started seeking out people with autism all over the world because of their disability. And because in the situation that they have, it's not a disability, it's an ability. Michael Phelps is the most decorated Olympian of all time. But he had ADHD, and his mom had a choice to make. Am I going to give him medicine to fix him? Or am I going to find a situation like athletics that rewards hyperactivity? And nobody calls Michael Phelps hyperactive. They call him dedicated. They call him determined. They call him disciplined. They call him an Olympic champion. Not in spite of his disability, but because he found a place that rewarded him for who he was instead of trying to turn him into someone else. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is broken. It's been broken for more than 800 years. In the 1930s, Mussolini decided it was time to fix this. This makes Italians look bad, is what he thought. We need to straighten it up. We need to fix it. And they tried and actually made it worse, which was a very lucky thing for the city of Pisa. Because millions of people have traveled millions of miles and spent millions of dollars to see a tower that leans. And the people who run the tower now say it this way, that because of its inclination, the tower has become the object of very special attention. And that's what I'm telling you. Because of your inclination, you will become the object of very special attention. And the problem is we're so busy trying to straighten people up. Instead of doing what the people realize at the tower, what the people realize at the tower is it's important to keep the current tilt due to the vital role that this has played in promoting the tourism industry of Pisa. We're too focused in this world on straightening people up. We're too busy fixing what's weird and fixing what's wrong. What we need to understand is that what makes us weird is what makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak is also what makes us strong. Thank you very much.